Hello, and welcome to the overview of Chapter 13, Chromosomes and Sex-Linked Inheritance. There are few genes present on the Y chromosome. One of the most important is the SRY gene that's responsible for male traits. Any of the alleles on the X chromosome have no copy on the Y, so these areas here do not have a matching gene or allele on the Y chromosome. Any recessive X traits will be expressed in males. A couple of well-known recessive link disorders are red-green color blindness and hemophilia. These traits affect males and will affect females that are homozygous recessive for the trait, which is rare. So with sex-linked traits, males will only have one copy of the X genes, whereas females would have two. So we need to compensate for this different number of genes in males and females, and we do this with something known as dosage compensation. Dosage compensation ensures that there's an equal level of expression of genes on the sex chromosomes. This is best illustrated in the case of calico cats. There is a gene that codes for orange pigment or black pigment. The orange is dominant over black. So in this first example, we have a male cat that has inherited the orange allele from its mother, so it will be an orange cat since it only gets one X chromosome. In the second case, we have a male cat that's inherited the recessive allele for black fur. In the next case, we have a female that is homozygous recessive, so it will have black fur. But so that only one gene is expressed, one of these X chromosomes actually condenses down into something known as a bar body. And in this case of a homozygous dominant orange cat, we also have one X chromosome will shrink down into something known as a bar body. This can be seen readily in the case of a heterozygous cat. During development, in some of the cells, the X chromosome with the recessive allele, with the recessive allele will shrink down into a bar body, and so those cells will only express orange fur, whereas in other cells in the same cat, the X chromosome with the dominant allele will shrink down into a bar body, and so those cells will only express the black fur. So you end up with a cat that has patches of orange and patches of black fur. The fur color on calico cats is also an epistatic condition because there is a second gene which actually codes for these white patches. And it's not really a white allele, it's a no pigment or pigment allele. So if it codes for no pigment, you get white patches. If it codes for pigment, you get either the orange or black patches depending on which allele in those cells is being expressed in this gene up here. So we've talked about inheriting traits on the autosomes, and we've talked about inheriting traits on the X or Y chromosome. Now let's look at inheriting traits that are found on neither of these, known as non-Mendelian inheritance. Hopefully you recall that mitochondria and chloroplasts also contain DNA, and they are generally inherited from only one parent. In the case of humans, it is the female egg that contains the mitochondria that is passed down to the new offspring. This can be illustrated in the LHON disease. It's a human mitochondrial disease that reduces efficiency of the electron transport chain, which can lead to neural degeneration. It is a mutation in mitochondrial DNA, so females will pass it on to their offspring, but males will not. In this first pedigree, you see a female that has the LHON condition, and she passes her mitochondria to all her offspring, so they will also have the condition. In the second pedigree, we have a male who has the condition, but he will not pass it to his offspring because he only passes his DNA to them through sperm. The offspring get their mitochondria from the mother. The next topic discussed in Chapter 13 is human genetic disorders. This table here from that chapter lists some important genetic human disorders. They're caused by mutations, which is a random process. So sometimes these random mutations will lead to disease. So there is a risk with mutations of developing diseases. Most of them come from what we call copy number variation. We shorten that to CNV. Copy number variation is a mutation that causes a variation in the single base pair substitutions or insertions or deletions. For example, over 50% of known mutations are single base substitutions. One base in, or one nucleotide in the gene code is substituted for another. And we've given an example before early in the semester of hemoglobin, and you can go back in your book and look at that. Another 24% of the mutations that lead to genetic disorders are small insertions or deletions of less than 20 bases in the DNA. Because humans lived in isolated populations for so long, certain diseases are more predominant in different human populations than others, but that's slowly changing now that we have world travel and are becoming more of a global community. Another type of mutation is caused by something known as nondisjunction. This is a failure of the homologs or sister chromatids to separate during meiosis. It leads to a condition called aneuploidy, where you have too many or too few chromosomes. Aneuploidy fertilization results in trisomy or monosomy. If you have trisomy, you end up with an extra chromosome in the zygote. In monosomy, you only have one chromosome in the zygote. Most of these situations will not produce a viable offspring. There are, however, a couple of situations that will. Those situations that are viable are trisomy of the autosomes 21 and 22. These are the smallest of the chromosomes, and if you have an extra 21 or an extra 22, that individual can survive to adulthood, but they will have the condition known as Down syndrome. This karyotype here shows you trisomy 21, which leads to Down syndrome. Trisomy 22 is much rarer. The risk of getting trisomy 22 is related to the age of the mother. Women 45 and over have a 1 in 16 chance of having a child with Down syndrome. That's why if you are over 45, or women over 45 who get pregnant are already categorized as high-risk pregnancies because of this. Non-disjunction in the sex chromosomes can lead to 3 conditions which are viable. They are known as the triple X syndrome, where you have 3 X chromosomes, but because X chromosomes, you only need one, the other one usually becomes a bar body. In the case of a triple X syndrome, 2 of the X chromosomes will become bar bodies, and so you still have one X chromosome that's operational. There are some mild symptoms to being a triple X female. The other condition, known as Klinefelter's syndrome, where you have an XXY male, again, you're going to have one of the X chromosomes will become a bar body. In the XO condition, it's known as Turner syndrome, and you can read about the symptoms for all of these syndromes in your textbook. In Turner syndrome, as long as you have one X chromosome, you can still have a viable offspring. And with it being female, it really didn't need the Y chromosome. The OY condition, because there is no X chromosome, it is not viable. And then there is a fourth condition known as Jacob's syndrome, which is an XYY. This is when non-disjunction occurs during spermatogenesis. So you end up with a sperm with 2 Y chromosomes. This is also viable, and you can read about the symptoms in your textbook. Thanks for watching.